My first English conversation. Do you remember the first time you spoke English with someone? Maybe you felt nervous. Maybe your hands were shaking. Maybe you forgot simple words that you already knew. If that happened to you, don't worry. It happened to me too. Today, I'd like to tell you the story of my first English conversation. It wasn't perfect. I made mistakes. I spoke slowly, but that short conversation changed the way I thought about learning English forever. Let's begin. The opportunity. For a long time, I learned English by myself. I listened to podcasts every day. I read simple English stories. I watched YouTube videos with subtitles. Little by little, my listening became better. My vocabulary slowly grew. But there was one thing I almost never did. I didn't speak. Every time I wanted to practice speaking, I felt nervous. I worried about my pronunciation. I worried about my grammar. Most of all, I worried about making mistakes. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to visit my favorite coffee shop. I brought an English book with me and sat near the window. After reading for about 20 minutes, I noticed a young man sitting at the next table. He was reading an English novel. A notebook lay beside his coffee, filled with English words and short sentences. I smiled because I knew he was learning English too. A few minutes later, he looked at me and smiled back. Then he asked, "Are you studying English?" For a second, my mind became completely empty. I knew the answer. It was a very simple question. But I suddenly forgot every English word I had ever learned. Then I took a deep breath. I smiled, and I answered, "Yes, I am." A conversation begins. He introduced himself. "My name is Daniel." I replied, "Nice to meet you. I'm Alex." Our conversation started with very simple questions. Where are you from? What do you do? Why are you learning English? I spoke slowly. Sometimes I needed a few seconds to think. Sometimes I used the wrong word. Once, I accidentally used the past tense when I should have used the present tense. I immediately felt embarrassed, but Daniel simply smiled. He didn't laugh. He didn't interrupt me. He patiently waited for me to finish. That made me feel much more comfortable. As the conversation continued, I became more relaxed. I realized something important. People were not listening to my grammar. They were listening to my ideas. Communication was much more important than perfection. For nearly 30 minutes, we talked about our hobbies. We talked about books. We talked about traveling. We talked about learning English. Whenever I couldn't remember a word, I described it using easier words. Surprisingly, Daniel understood me almost every time. That experience gave me confidence. I didn't need perfect English. I only needed the courage to keep talking. The biggest lesson. Before meeting Daniel, I believed that fluent speakers never made mistakes. That day completely changed my opinion. Even Daniel sometimes stopped to think. Sometimes he corrected himself. Sometimes he searched for a better word. Nobody speaks perfectly all the time. Not even native speakers. Language is not about being perfect. Language is about connecting with people. When I accepted that idea, speaking became much easier. After finishing our coffee, Daniel gave me one piece of advice. He said, "Don't wait until your English is perfect. Speak now. Improve while speaking." Those words stayed in my mind for a long time. From that day on, I promised myself something. I would speak English whenever I had the chance. Even if I made mistakes. Even if I felt nervous. Because every conversation would teach me something new. A new habit. When I arrived home, I felt excited. I opened my notebook and wrote down everything I could remember from our conversation. New words. Useful expressions. Interesting questions. Then I practiced answering those questions again by myself. What are your hobbies? What kind of books do you like? Why are you learning English? Every evening, I spent 10 minutes speaking aloud. Sometimes I recorded my voice. Sometimes I spoke in front of a mirror. At first, it felt strange. But after a few weeks, it became completely normal. Little by little, my pronunciation improved. My confidence grew. Most importantly, I stopped being afraid. I discovered that confidence does not come before action. Confidence comes after action. Every small conversation made the next one easier. Every mistake became another lesson. Looking back, my first English conversation was far from perfect. I made grammar mistakes. I forgot simple words. I spoke much more slowly than I wanted. But none of those things mattered. What mattered was that I finally started. That one conversation became the beginning of a new journey. Today, I still make mistakes. I still learn new words every week. But I am no longer afraid to speak. If you are waiting until your English become perfect, let me share one simple idea. Don't wait. Speak today. Even 1 minute of conversation is better than 1 hour of worrying. You will never feel completely ready. But every time you speak, you become a little stronger. Every sentence builds your confidence. Every conversation brings you closer to your dream. Thank you for listening to my story today. I hope it encourages you to take your first step. Keep listening. Keep reading. keep speaking. And remember, every great English speaker was once a beginner. I'll see you in the next English Learning Podcast. Have a wonderful day.